Hello, everybody. Let's get started. Welcome to the Justinmind webinar on creating responsive prototypes. I'm Danielle Schneider, and I'll be taking you through all the tools that you'll need to get started with creating responsive prototypes in Justinmind. So just a quick overview of the tools that we're going to introduce today that will help you create these responsive prototypes. So the first thing that we're going to note, we'll note here is that you will create responsive headers and footers that will respond to the width of the screen while you're simulating. So if you expand that screen width, the headers and footers that you create will follow that width, and if you narrow that page, those headers and footers will narrow as well. We'll also show you how you can create a rectangle or an image and choose to style that image through the cover property. So when you expand that page width, that image will follow that cover style that you see in so much web design and other apps these days. The next thing we'll introduce are breakpoints. We'll show you how to create breakpoints in your prototype so you can shift the prototype design at mobile and tablet and different web widths, so that you can show each of your designs that you've created for all of those different widths, those screen widths. And the last main point we'll introduce today are pin positions. So using pin positions, you can pin an element to a certain part of the screen, and no matter how you change the screen width or height, it will always remain pinned in that position. So you won't have any elements that won't follow the margins that you create. They will stay in that place. And as always, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So if there's anything you would like clarification on, feel free to leave a question below and we'll get to that at the end. And if you have any questions that aren't specifically relating to responsive prototypes, you have general questions about Justinmind, things like that, you can head on over to our community forum at justinmind.com/community and leave a question there. Or if you have a subscription with us, you can go to the customer support portal and leave your question there and we'll get back to you right away. All right, so let's get started with the prototypes that we've created for you guys today. So the first thing I'm going to show you are some quick tips to get you started with just a blank canvas. And then after that, we'll show you what you can do if you already have a design created and you would like to make it responsive. So the first thing we're going to show you is how to create that responsive footer, using a table. So if you have icons in your table, you can make them follow the screen as it widens. So that we're going to change this to 1 row and 4 columns, this table. And the first thing I'm going to show you, a responsive property that you can choose, is if you go to the properties palette and you go to the size position here, if you change the width to percentage, change it back to 100. So once we've changed this to be percentage based, if we change the size of this Android phone canvas, the table will expand along with that width. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add a couple of what could be icons. In this case, actually, we'll change this to have a background. Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is create that would-be icon and just make it a little smaller so that it would be in around the shape or the size that you would have an icon. So we're going to drag that into the first cell, and this is really easy. So all you have to do is just copy and paste, and it will reflect the properties that you've assigned to the table and to the cells. And if we go and we change the canvas size, you can go ahead and do this on any Android device or custom tablet or web. You select that base page in the outline palette, then these indicators will appear that will allow you to easily change the size of the canvas without needing to set any numbers in there. So once we do that, and we'll see that these icons have expanded along or have shifted along with the width of the canvas. You can do this as wide or as narrow as you would like, and they will reflect that view. So let me show you a few other basic tricks that we have that you can utilize when you're using an Android device or custom canvas. So if you go ahead and you load up the Android phone widget library, that's available at widgets. You can go to add, remove libraries and select that there. Or if you selected an Android phone when you went to create a prototype, these widgets will already be available. So the helpful thing about these Android widgets is that they are all responsive. So if we dragged, let's go ahead and find a status bar that you might use, and we can search. There we go, status bar. So as we drag this in here, you'll see that it's not all the way across the screen, but once we lay it down and we place it on the canvas, it will automatically respond and expand to the width of the canvas that we've defined. And if we investigate this a little more closely, we'll get a hint or a peek at some of the other things that we'll show you today in order to create that responsive prototype. So each of these little icons is utilizing pinned positions. And this is available under the Properties palette, under the Position section. So this Signals icon is using the Pin to Right option under the X parameter here, and it's created a margin so that it's not all the way to the right. And this entire thing is pinned to the top so that it will stay up there at the screen as you scroll, if there was a scrolling aspect to this example or this prototype. And another thing we'll show you just to show you how other parts of this library can be utilized. And we'll drag this example down here, and we can drag it down, and it will expand along the parameters that we have just put on it. And again, as we showed before, you can expand the width of that canvas, and all of those widgets that we've just dragged in into this canvas, they will reflect that. So that's just a basic look at some of these tools. Hopefully they illuminate some of the basic, how easy it is really to get started with creating a responsive prototype. But now we'll shift into showing how you can turn a prototype that you've already created to be responsive, changing that prototype to be responsive. So we have this example that we have gone ahead and already created. So right now this one is responsive. So if we simulate this, and we drag this along, you can see that these elements on the screen respond to our scroll. They expand or contract along with that scroll. But we have that same example, but with all of those responsive designations not included. So if we simulate this, we'll see that nothing really, go back, nothing really responds to this, the width of the screen. Everything really stays static. And this is great if you just want to show off a design that you've created. But if you want to show off that design as responsive as it could be viewed on multiple devices, changing that prototype to be responsive would be the way to go. So let's start changing this prototype to be responsive. It will just change everything on the screen. Very few steps needed. So the first thing we're going to select is this travel share text up at the top. We're going to go to the pin position options, click on that. We're going to go to the X parameter and change it to be pin to left. Then we're going to go back and add that margin of 50 so that it is not hugging just the left part of the screen. It has a little bit of a margin. So what this has done is it's created, now that this travel share text will always be at the left of the screen, and it will stay at this margin even if you expand that screen width or narrow it. The next thing we're going to do is select this login sign up group. We're going to click on display pin position options, pin this to the right, and then go ahead and add that margin once again. Same thing as the travel share text, just applied to this dynamic panel that includes each of these smaller items, smaller elements. Let's select this title text and we're going to pin it to the center. It should already be in the center of the screen, but once we've pinned it, it will always stay in the center of the screen as we scroll or as we expand the width. We're going to do the same thing to this text here. Next thing we're going to do is select this rectangle and change the width to percentage. Should already be at 100, so now this rectangle will expand along the screen. So this rectangle has a background image applied to it with the cover style already applied. So when we simulated that unresponsive version of this, you can't see that cover style in action. But once you make this a 100% width, as you expand and contract that screen, you'll see the effect applied. So if you're looking for that look, that CSS style, that might be what you're looking for, this is definitely what you should use. And there are a bunch of different options available when you add a background image. All right, let's keep going. So we're going to expand this dynamic panel and select panel 7. So each of these dynamic panels are really helpful for splitting your prototype up into different sections for if you want to apply different styles and different parameters to those sections. So in this case, we have this dynamic panel that expands all the way across and down here. So once we apply this 100% width, this dynamic panel and everything contained in it will be 100% width. We'll continue, change this panel to also be 100% width. So now everything in this panel will be 100% with respect to this parent panel. So elements like dynamic panels, tables, and screens themselves act like a parent in which all of the elements within that parent will respect the properties that you have defined. So, for example, these will only take up the width of this panel rather than the entire screen. All right, let's continue and select this paragraph that we have. It's down here. We'll change this width to be 100%, or rather 65%. So it won't expand all the way across the screen, just part of it. We'll select the image and change this to percentage. And as you can see, it's really just changing a few properties here and there to make your prototype responsive. There's no need to go and define any complex relationships. Really, it's just one parameter here or there for any element you would like to follow the expansion of the screen. And one feature for images that we have is to lock the aspect ratio of the image as it expands across or contracts across the screen, so it won't look really weird as you change that width. It will respect that aspect ratio if you choose to define it that way. Let's continue by selecting this upper paragraph, changing the width to percentage. I'm going to keep it at the percentage we have now. Go back up here to the title and percentage. Again, really easy parameters to change, not anything complicated at all. Let's go back to this footer down here. We're going to change this again, 100% width. And down here we have all of these different icons, and we'd like these to stay pinned to certain parts of the screen as we expand and narrow that screen. So we're going to utilize the pin position options that we've shown you guys here today. Expand those options. We're going to choose the X parameter, and we're going to change it to be pinned to the center with a 70 pixel margin so that it stays even between these. I'm going to choose that Twitter icon, and it should already be in the center of the screen. There we go. Now we just have to pin it. That's it. Choose this Facebook icon, pin it to the center, this time with a negative 70 pixel margin. Really just one or two things left here as we to make this responsive. We're going to choose this travel share text, pin this to the center, as it already should be in the center, but we'll make sure that's the case always. And last thing is this text. Okay, so that is everything on the screen already changed to be responsive in just a few minutes. So once we simulate, we can see how that worked out. All right, so it looks exactly like the example, the completed example that I showed you guys just a few minutes ago. And all it took was changing a few parameters here and there on for the elements on the screen. But you'll notice that as we narrow this more and more, things start to not look right. Some text gets cut off, things might need to be restructured to make things more visible and make things work better for a smaller device type like mobile. So this is where breakpoints come in handy. So we've actually already created a mobile version of this interface that will better reflect that smaller, or be better utilized for that smaller device type. And this is done with just one step. We go to events. And there are many different ways to define breakpoints, but in this case, we're going to use an event. So we're going to create an on window resize that will be the trigger of this event. And link to, that's already what we want. We're going to have it linked to the mobile version. Click OK, that's it. But we need to define a condition because right now it will link to the screen, the mobile screen, whenever the window resizes. But we only want it to link when it's a certain width. So we need to add a condition. We open up the conditions editor. We'll go to constants. This is where you'll find many other options to create your conditions. We're going to choose window width, drag that up here. So right now it's when the window width. We need to go back to functions. When the window width is less than, and in this case it's going to be 650. So 650 pixels wide, and then you can, depending on your own prototype, it may be a smaller or larger number. Really just depends on where you'd like to link to that mobile or tablet interface. And you can figure that out as you go. All right, so that's a really simple event. So when on window resize, when the window width is less than 650 pixels, they will link to the screen. So let's see how that looks. Scrolling up, and now we're at the mobile interface. There we go. And back on this mobile screen, we have a few other events, and they're basically just the opposite of what we've created for the desktop. When the window width is greater than 650, it will link to this screen. Or actually, it'll link to the first example, the first iteration of that screen. And it has a few other events here to move some stuff around the screen when the window width is a certain is at a certain point. So these are the other kinds of breakpoints that you can use. So if, for example, when you're creating these breakpoints, there are a few different strategies that you can take. The first one, as we showed you here, is to create an event to link to an already created interface. Another way is to create that same event, but instead of having it linked to another screen, it can trigger things to move around the screen, to move into place where they will be more visible. Or you can link to a dynamic panel that has that already created mobile style. It really depends on how complicated the prototype that you've created is and how many different elements that you have on the screen. In this case, it makes more sense to link to that other mobile interface. But if you really only have a few things on the screen, maybe a couple of columns or images, and you would like to just resize or move them, that would be one way to go. Really easy thing to do. So that's it, guys. That's all you need to know. The basic tools that you'll have to create that responsive prototypes. Main points here are window width, or width of an element on the screen. Making that 100% or 65% or anything like that. And pin positions, pinning an element to a part of the screen so that as you expand that screen, it will stay in place. All right, so we've got percentage widths, we've got pin positions, and we've got breakpoints. So those are the three main things that you need to know, along with what we showed you earlier with utilizing tables to create that responsive footer or header. So those are the basic things you need to know to get started creating your own responsive prototypes. And that's it. Let's go answer any questions that you guys might have at this point. Can you work with columns? Oh, for sure. So if you had an element on the screen or anything on the screen that was more vertical rather than horizontal, you can definitely work with columns and it will respect that same spacing that you applied in the horizontal case. Can I link to a mobile device in a breakpoint, or does it just have to be a web interface? No, it can be any type of of device. So if, for example, we had a mobile interface, but it was in the iPhone shell, and we can choose the device. We choose this iPhone. You can create that same interface within this shell, and when you create that breakpoint, it will link just the same to this iPhone interface. You just need to change the event to link to the screen instead. Any other ways to define breakpoints besides window width? Yeah, there's one other way that you could definitely do if you don't want to have to bother with window widths. So you can create, it'll be the same on window resize, but you will use the intersect condition. So we go and create this really quickly. The condition that we need to create is really simple. We go down to areas, and I don't have anything in particular here that we'd have intersect, but just as an example, if we drag this in here, that out there. So this isn't really a valid condition because nothing in here will intersect, but if there was something that would intersect on this screen, that would, when you expand or contract that window width, things will look kind of strange, things will cross over into each other. This is another way that you could define that breakpoint. So when an element on the screen intersects another element on the screen, that's the condition, it will link to that screen. All right, let's keep going with a few questions. Can I use pin positions to adjust the distance between elements in a dynamic panel? So yes and no. It depends on how you've defined it. So if let's go back up to the basic elements. So if we drag that dynamic panel change that to be at the corner. Oh, things are moving a little slowly. I think I'm running out of memory. This computer. All right. So if we set this to be 100%, and if we just added an ellipse, excuse me, we have this ellipse in here, and we change that pin position to be pin to left. Just copy and paste that. We also have this pin to left, but with this margin. Actually, let me copy this. And paste this on a web screen. That would be a better way of doing this. There you go. All right, so we have this panel, and let's go ahead and see how this will look at this moment. Oh, need to change. Oh, here we go. We need to pin. So when you have things in a dynamic panel, you also need to change their widths in this case. That might be a way you want to go about this. In any case, this might take a little longer, so we want to move on to another question, but I encourage you to send that to our community forum, and we can create a more in-depth example. I just want to get to some other questions at this point. How can you transfer a responsive prototype to a fully functional website? So because Justinmind is a prototyping software, you'll need to get a developer on your team and change that prototype to be an actual website using some code, some HTML, that kind of stuff. More questions here. Is it possible to create a sticky top menu? Yeah, that is really, really simple. So if we change the height of this to be more, and we'll just drag a rectangle here just to denote that the screen, just to show something that we'll scroll past. Go up down here, drag this up. All right. So we'll change this to, this is really simple. So all we need to do is change the Y to pin to top. So now as we scroll down the screen, this will always remain at the top. And while we're here, we'll just set this to be 100% so we don't have to, just so that this will always remain at 100% of the screen. So let's go ahead and check this out. All right, we're scrolling, and that's the bottom. It's really easy. All you need to do is change it to pin to top. And the same thing can apply for a footer, but all you would need to do is place it at the bottom of the screen and change the to be pinned to bottom. And it'll actually automatically go there if you change that parameter. You can pin it at the top, go back up to the top. You don't really even need to place it in any particular place. You could change that position and it'll go ahead and automatically do that. Let's keep going. So I see a few more specific questions about creating really specific prototypes. Please send those along to our community forum, and with that file compressed into a zip format or any other kind of format, or upload it to Dropbox and link to it there, and we can take a look and provide any guidance, or perhaps alter that prototype to better reflect what you're looking to do. Okay, one last question here. Will we be sharing a recording of this too? Absolutely. We always share recordings of the webinars that we host to our YouTube channel, and then I believe we'll be sending this out to those of you who signed up to view this webinar, or those of you who are tuning in later via that link that we'll send out. Okay, guys, so that's all we're going to get to today. I hope you found the tools that we showed you helpful for creating that responsive prototype. And if there's anything that you that we didn't get to today, anything that you would like some more clarification on, again, I encourage you to go to our community forum at justinmind.com/community. Leave that there. Or if you have a subscription with us, go to our customer support portal, ask it there, and we'll get back to you right away. Okay, guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. and I'll see you in the next one.